This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. This is Razib with the Unsupervised Learning podcast. Actually, I'm going to do something a little different today from what I usually do with the intro. Also, can you please rate or review my podcast on all the different platforms? I know I don't hawk that a lot, but if I don't, people just stop rating it, and everyone else's ratings are going up and mine are staying static. So I got to keep up with the Joneses and the whatevers, right? Now onto the main show. I am here with default friend Katherine Dee. She is a freelance writer, and she writes at a lot of different places. We're going to be talking about one particular place, but Katherine, could you tell us all the different places you're writing at right now?
Yeah, I write regularly for Return, Tablet, the Washington Examiner, Unheard, the Spectator, and then wherever else asks me, like Compact, which we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So, you're known as a culture writer on the internet, I guess. It's one of the things you do. You have a Substack, you have podcast, and you're on a lot of podcasts. You're all over the place. But I do want the listeners to know that I know you from before you blew up, I would say, back when we lived in the same town, and I hung out with you a couple of times, and you were doing the career transition thing. So I just want people to know we do know each other a little bit IRL, aside from our internet connections, which are pretty extensive insofar as I've actually contributed to some of the same publications as you. We share a lot of common friends, and we interact with each other on a site called, am I going to call it X? I'll call it X. But Twitter, X, the website formerly known as Twitter, and that's what we're going to be talking about because you have a piece in Compact. But first, I actually want to start out with a more general question, because this is something I actually talked to Mark Andreessen about on Clubhouse. And you cover a lot of internet culture, a lot of weird things that I don't really know about, honestly. So that's a particular type of culture, right? But what pop culture is not internet culture today? Like, is there anything that is actually mass media pop culture that does not have an internet component or internet medium?
I don't think so. I wrote an article for the Washington Examiner recently that was basically like all culture writers are internet culture writers at this point. I think there's like two different like textures to it, right? Like there's writing about sort of internet native culture, and then there's more of a commercial internet, like the normie internet, and then there's the non-normie internet. And I think that's the actual fault line.
Yeah, so you're talking about, like, say, Amazon, going to Amazon and buying something. That's the commercial internet. And then, I don't know, reading the New York Times. But then there's a whole other aspect of weird people with anons on social media. But there's also the Instagram world, which is totally different. Presumably, there's a Snapchat world, which, like, I do have Snap installed, I think, but I've literally used it once. So there's all of these subcultures that are out there, and we're going to be talking mostly about the Twitter subculture, which is one particular subculture. But when we're talking about internet cultures, this is a vast archipelago, right?
Yeah, I mean it's so huge. More people should be working on internet studies. I think it's kind of remarkable that it's actually like relatively small.
Yeah, so I mean, for example, 4chan got really big. I mean, 4chan's been around for a long time, but 4chan got really big, during the Trump, period era. I don't know what you want to call it, because a lot of these young shitlords, their memes got mainlined into Twitter, and then from Twitter it went into the broader culture. But people actually don't know that it's from 4chan, and so I mean that's an interesting aspect to me. It's so ubiquitous, but it's also so dispersed that people don't know the different connections, and it's kind of like this big blob, and people are insulated from the mechanics of the blob.
Yeah, it is really weird. And there's also this other thing where it's like there's so much of it that like actually it's like on one hand I think it's fine that you don't know everything, right? Because it actually these things go so deep, it would be like impossible. Um for example, like I actually think 4chan got big with all their like Scientology kind of pranks, right? But I mean, did it, or was that just my particular bubble, right? But then on the other hand, I feel like people still don't take the internet seriously, which is like a weird thing because we're kind of always ambiently online at this point. There is no real like logging off.
Yeah, I mean, are you a little resentful because you're an internet culture writer?
No, I'm not too resentful. I mean, I feel like since I sort of started as like a Twitter personality, like just to be like totally transparent, and then I eventually became known for my writing. For me, it's almost like the not being taken totally seriously is par for the course, right? But yeah, I mean, I think people would probably serve people well to take it just a touch more seriously.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of your origins, and I don't want to like, it's not that big of a deal. Although I do have to say, as I said, I've known you. I mean, I think we've known each other to various degrees for like over 5 years now.
Yeah.
And you do have a relatively, yeah. Go on.
I was just say I think I first met you. I don't wasn't in person, but like I met you in like 2015.
Yeah, we probably interacted already in 2015, so I guess that's a long time. That is a long time. I had fewer children in 2015 than I do now, but
Yeah.
that's how I think of it. But your profile has kind of gone up exponentially. I remember, yeah, I remember like I've had friends who have like been surprised that I know you because you're someone to know, and I'm just like, well, that's cool, but I mean, I did know her before she wasn't a thing on the internet, so it's just interesting to see that particular trajectory of how you came out of, if I'm correct, you came out of like Discord, the Discord world.
Sort of. I mean, I've been on Twitter since 2007, and I had like various like anonymous accounts, but I started being more open on Twitter because I was in Oliver Traldi's Discord server.
Yeah, and Oliver has been on this podcast. So again, a lot of this, I don't want to say incestuous. There are billions of people in the world, but apparently there's only a couple of thousand interesting ones. I don't know. It seems like everyone knows everyone else in my world, and maybe that's because small world topologies work out where we're in these bubbles. But that's how I feel with you, in terms of you came out of this particular subculture that I was adjacent to. People like Cody Ross, Oliver Traldi, both of them who've been on this podcast actually. So that's weird, but it is what it is. And now you're a internet culture writer that has, I mean, you know, I'm just gonna say it, like you're bigger than them, So you never know who you're mentoring in your Discord, who's gonna get bigger and become a profile. Like you had a normal kind of corporate. I mean, it wasn't a big company, but you were at an agency. I kind of wasn't gonna ask you this question because I didn't think about it, but like, you had a normal life with a normal person job, and now you're doing this. And I have a startup, as the most of the listeners know, but then I also have whatever I'm doing here, you know? And so how is that sometimes? Do you ever think about it? Do you ever reflect on it? Like, how do you explain it to people?
Um, I mean, I actually don't interact with a lot of people now who aren't in this world, which is actually kind of crazy. Um, but I mean, I sometimes miss the normalcy of corporate life. After the agency, I worked for like a couple of like large tech companies. Um, and I mean, there's definitely like a comfort to that, right? Because you get there's like gelato on campus and you ride your little bike around and there's something like very like idyllic about that lifestyle. And now I just feel like I'm like a NEET who has to like, do a bunch of work like 3 days a week. And then otherwise it
You
feels
gotta
a lot like
hustle.
college. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking. I mean, it's interesting because, the internet opened up the possibility for everyone to be kind of their own entrepreneur in a way. Entrepreneur with their skills, with their services, with their hustles, and that's kind of cool. It's kind of liberating, but it's also a lot. It's really stressful, and there are people that go between the two, between corporate and this like kind of hustle life, and there's others who prefer one way or the other. And you don't know who you are until you do it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I feel like I always wanted like, especially when I was at the agency, which I hate it. I mean, I did not I did not have a good time in Texas for most of it. It got a lot better towards the end, but I like really missed having the freedom to do stuff. And now I feel like I have all the freedom in the world, and I'm like, damn, I could use some structure.
Yeah. I know the feeling. So I want to ask. We will get to the piece in compact. Just for people who want to jump ahead, why you're never leaving Twitter, Katherine Dee. It's in compact, August 10th, 2023. I actually do like compact. I do subscribe to compact, even though they did kind of attack me in that piece with Michael Lynn. Just like I was a little part of it, but that was kind of annoying because I do know the people at compact. But whatever. It's the world as it is. But it's a good. I'm not gonna say it's good because like whether it's good or bad is depending on like where you start out from. It's interesting. I think you can say that. Okay. But I want to ask you about online personas and stuff like that. Because I have a lot of Zoomer friends, not a lot, but I have some Zoomer friends. I have a lot of millennial friends. You're a millennial. I'm Gen X myself. And I think one of the issues and questions that I really do think about is online personas versus offline personas, how they're merging, how they're bifurcating, and how that's affecting people. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone. I think for some people, it's uh, that like truly their profiles are an extension of themselves, and I think those people probably have a harder time with everything. uh, I also think, like, weirdly enough, people who are most likely to fall into that trap are like journalists, where like like truly they are their Twitter selves, and they're also like the most likely group to receive just like heinous amounts of hate that is very difficult to make sense of, and at the same time is pretty meaningless. But then I think for other people, it's more of like a laboratory to experiment with, like maybe like a more distilled version of yourself, or maybe it's not like literally who you are, but there's a certain emotional truth to your internet persona. For other people, they're just like blowing off steam. Like a great example of this would be Radfem Hitler on Twitter/X, who is, for anyone who doesn't know who she is, she just like all day is just like railing on men. And I mean, the rate that this woman comes out with like criticisms of men is really impressive, and it's always very funny. But she's another person I know in real life, and she's really sweet and like a demure, like Midwestern girl. And you would never, like, even the way she treats men in real life, you would never assume. And it really is a character. It's actually, she's like getting onto a stage, and it's a bit, even if it's not, she's not lying, but
Yeah.
she is playing a role. So it depends on your approach, I think.
Yeah, I've talked to Rad Fem on Clubhouse, not many times, but probably a dozen times, and yeah, she does have a Midwestern affect, and she does seem sweet and nice. So it's interesting because I do follow the account, and just so people get a sense, it's kind of you kind of like take misogyny and then you invert it. I mean, she's can be funny, but it's a very negative take on males, and sometimes I do feel that the joke is pretty obvious insofar as you're an incel and here's why you should be. Enjoy it or something like that. It's just like, just like just accept who you are. You're a piece of crap because you're a man and that's what you were born to be. Like weird things like, I'm exaggerating, but I mean that's kind of the attitude. So it's obviously not real. I know she has a real life and real interactions with men and whatnot. So I don't get the whole shtick, I guess, because I do follow the account and I just see that stuff. I don't know this person in real life, and so that's a common issue. You don't know the person in real life. You think that what they're like on the internet is going to be what they're like in real life, and there's a lot of people that are very, very opposite, and then some people who are the same, like you were saying. Some people are a little exaggerated. I would say I'm harsher on the internet. than I am in real life, but I don't think I'm really that different. So it's like it's a whole spectrum, right?
Yeah, and it just depends on. I mean, it depends. This sounds like such a cop out answer, but it like kind of does depend on like your needs and like why you're using it and what platform you're on. There's so many different variables.
Yeah, so I mean, these are the nuances that are going to be like, oh, what to a lot of boomers. So, for example, Instagram. I mean, outside of maybe teenagers, Instagram is a little. I would say it's a bit saccharine. By which I mean, so if Twitter is snark, Instagram is saccharine. So Twitter, you're trying to be clever, witty in the short amount of characters, but on Instagram, you need to show everyone your beautiful cupcake. You know, it's like your whole life is a beautiful pink cupcake with blue sprinkles and a delicious looking glaze. Obviously it's not, it's all fake, but that's what you do. That's what I do. I do a lot of food Instagramming. If people who follow me on Instagram, which is a private account, so don't try to follow me, by the way. And if I don't know you, I'm not going to accept, just so you guys know. But in any case, so Instagram is that one face. On Twitter, you have these short form comments, like kind of snarky, kind of harsh. And then, I have Substack, you have Substack. That's a more long form place to put your thoughts out, right? So, medium affects the message.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like it's almost even more broad than being able to assign a specific mood to it. I think sometimes you can, but like there's many different ways to use Instagram. I think a lot of Zoomers use it in this sort of surreal, detached way. Like sometimes the images are like it's like a reverse curation. They're almost like purposely kind of like wacky and like they don't look good as a way to identify against the millennial curation. I mean, we could go down rabbit holes for every platform, and I'll spare your audience that. But yeah, there's so many different forms of expression.
So before we go on, and I want to go to Twitter. I want to go to the Compa piece, but I want to just like have a not a placeholder, but just like a little information here, just so people get a sense. There's like eight some billion people in the world. Facebook claims it has 3 billion active users, even if that's only like half true. Whatever, it's still like billions, right? YouTube has 2.2 million uh MAUs, so like monthly active users as well. WhatsApp 2 billion, Instagram 2 billion, WeChat 1.2 billion. That's just basically China, I think. TikTok has a billion. So that's like every single teenager in the world or something. Twitter X probably on the order of 450 million. So we are going to be talking about a platform, about a social media app that is dwarfed by all the others, but people talk about it a lot. And well, let's just start out there. Why do people talk about it a lot? There's actually a lot in your piece about why people talk about Twitter all the time, even though there's not that many people on Twitter.
Yeah, it well, just like Clubhouse, like you were referencing. It's not how many people are on it; it's who's on it. And what it's used for not just media distribution, but idea generation. This really hit like a fever pitch in the Trump administration, but it was happening like much earlier than that, and it's still happening, right? In fact, arguably, it's become worse. And now it just sort of is a companion to TikTok in terms of like where are people getting ideas to write about.
Yeah, so I saw like I'll give you a concrete example. This is try to keep the podcast evergreen, but this is going to be dated and people aren't going to remember this. But my friend Inez Stepman, who was on this podcast recently, she tweeted about how young starlets, like the one in Snow White, what's her name? They have wide set eyes. Um, right now, a lot of them have wide set eyes. Rachel Ziegler, as does the woman in Little Mermaid and stuff like that. Okay, so there's a bunch of these women. Anya Taylor Joy, her too. Okay, so they have wide set eyes, and then Stepman just made a comment asking, and eventually it became a huge thing. Some like um, influencer bro said it's because they look like herbivores, and so you can be a predator on them. Okay, that's weird. And then eventually it got to Rolling Stone, and Rolling Stone wrote an article about phrenologists on Twitter, and so Annette Stepman had become a phrenologist because she had talked about this, and it was really and because I know her, and we were like talking about this, it's a very offhand comment that somehow triggered something, and now it's become so the for the people who want to look it up. Why are the girlies so into phrenology? Self-appointed experts in a discredited pseudoscience about skull measuring have undertaken social media. Um, like
You know what's so
literally,
frustrating about
it
that
was a
though?
tweet. Yeah, go
Like
on.
it's like what pisses me off about the like right wing extremism online beat is like there's always a very interesting kernel of truth. Like people do like the word physiognomy has come back, and there are people who are not even within like right wing Twitter, which is of course all journalists' eyes are on it at all times, right? For some reason, like I see TikToks about physiognomy all the time, and they feel like astrology videos, and that's actually like, well, why is that? And there's probably tons of reasons. Like filters are misleading, so there's maybe a search for some sort of hidden truth. I mean, there could be a million like really interesting reasons for it that has nothing to do with like racism. And they just miss because they're so like zoomed in on this like let's paint like random like mildly conservative people on Twitter as like these heinous racists. Like, that's like always the MO. They miss the interesting story. And I mean, I think there's even an interesting story on like Inez was right. Like people do like this is a trending look. Is there a reason for that? Like they kind of look like anime characters. Is there something there? I don't know. Just it always really like frustrates me. Like just the
Sure.
missed opportunity.
Yeah, so I will say in terms of Twitter, it's interesting. Um, I know they're and I use them for my Substack pieces, but the extended tweets, those aren't really where it's at. People are still staying to 250 and below, 256, whatever it is, and these like short little comments, and you can say a lot of different things and intend a lot of different things with these comments, and so you don't know where they're going to go. You don't really even have control. So it's this chaotic meme factory that you're just pulling out of. And I think the main issue that I would take with some of the journalistic observations is that the person making the comment is intending what played out at all. Usually they're intending nothing. It's literally just like a brain fart.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially Rolling Stone like has this like just ridiculous hard on for like, like fan fiction about right wing Twitter, right? And not to let right wing Twitter off the hook. There's plenty going on there. It's just they always miss the story, and they always misidentify people who have nothing to do with it. Um, I think it's a shame because there's definitely like real trends that happen, and they don't. They also, but I will say in their defense, like they don't have the time, as I myself don't have the time to like spend like the time like marinating within these subcultures to write like very robust investigative pieces. And that's part of the problem, right? Like not only is there no time to go out in the field as in like in the physical world, unless you're very privileged and you have like a very rarefied position, there's also not enough time to even like play anthropologist or investigative journalist online because you need to be like producing at this sort of insane rate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Do you know, this is again outside of the list of notes that we have, but I'm going to ask you, do you know the stuff that happened with Raw Egg Nationalist and I think New Founding?
I didn't see what I know there was some kind of thread and some sort of
Mhm.
drama there, but I don't know exactly what happened.
I mean, I don't know, like, again, I literally spent like 20 minutes. It was just like, it's really difficult to keep track of what's going on the internet. But journalists had started getting into it, and so I was like, "What's going on here?" I didn't know much about Raw Egg Nationalist. He's some far right figure. I think of him like BAP, except he's more into fitness, I guess, or eating. I don't know. And so I don't know much about this, but he got into a partnership with New Founding, which is a right wing kind of like think tank run by Nate Fisher. I know Nate a little bit. He's in the Claremont circle, is what I would say. He lives in Dallas. He comes down to Austin every now and then. He's a very serious Reformed Christian, so Protestant Calvinist, and that's New Founding's thing. and they're getting attacked by these other Christians who I don't know, because like I don't know Christian Twitter. Okay, so he's for being associated with a Nazi, and then they go through this book or this magazine that Raw Egg publishes, and BAP is in it too, and they talk about how there's all this Nazi imagery, and a lot of it looks like to be jokes, but I don't know. I mean, it's a little awkward because jokes about Nazis, I don't know. I'm not like really down with that personally. Um, and then there's stuff about there's nudity, obviously, and not obviously, but and then New Founding is Calvinist, and so they're attacking them for the association, all this stuff. And after about 20 minutes, I'm just, you know what I honestly did? I declared epistemological bankruptcy. In terms of, I was just like, okay, I'm just not going to figure this out. I'm just not going to know. Okay. So I am like exiting out of this, and I am not going to draw any conclusion, because the only reason that I was interested is I know Nate Fisher somewhat, and I was just curious, and I have no conclusion. And that's just all I'm going to say. And I wish people would be like that more.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the right wing thing is like a hot topic, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on there, because it's like I think there's just so many levels, right? Like obviously the BAP circles have a lot of cultural cachet, and conservatives have sort of, and right wingers in general have sort of felt for such a long time that they're like terminally uncool, and finally there's an expression of right wing thought and right wing subcultures that are like, wow, like everyone sort of wants to be, not everyone, obviously, right? Not everyone, but they're cool, right? People are paying attention to them. They're edgy. They're bad boys, right? They also joke, or in some cases, like quite seriously flirt with National Socialism. And it's just like, it's so hard to know like what to do with that, or like where to draw the line. And then like, what is the difference between drawing a personal line and then like being a woke scold? That's another complicated thing. And it's become like incredible. It's like just a swamp. Like it's so hard to untangle what to do with these things.
Well, also, there are other things. I mean, we're going a little off topic. Whatever. This is how the internet is. So let's just go with it, right? Rich men north of Richmond. So people know that I'm on Twitter. A lot of you listeners know that I'm on Twitter. But one thing you have to understand is I don't really pay attention to a lot of the things that are happening around me too closely. I just tweet, and then I engage the people that engage with me, and I look for news, So there's a lot of things that are happening, like what's Wordle? I still don't know really what Wordle is. Okay, not gonna lie, it's Wordle, right? In the New York Times now. Okay, yeah, I don't know what it is. Okay, I see it on my timeline a lot. For a while, I saw it all the time. I never bothered to figure it out. So there are things that happen that become things. So for example, rich men north of Richmond. I just ignored it for a while because I'm like, what's up with the ginger? Like this ginger keeps showing up in my timeline. So I finally like figured it out. But here's the thing with rich men out of Richmond, north of Richmond. I actually didn't know if it was like a left wing thing or a right wing thing. Like I could not tell from the song itself. Maybe I'm just stupid, but I mean, in hindsight, it makes sense. But if you just initially listen to the song, I'm not totally sure. But somehow it became culturally polarized on the internet. And now all the lefties are making fun of it. And all these right wing people are like, oh, this guy is great. This pathetic guy is great, So that's just how it is. So sometimes stuff just happens on the internet, and it just happens because it happens. There's no fundamental, deeper principle there. And so I think that's also part of the problem with trying to understand what's going on. And that's why I try not to understand a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean it's so ephemeral, and like to actually like be paying attention takes up so much mental real estate. Like another thing about the Richmond north of Richmond thing is then like within these sort of like right-wing internet circles, there's like ruralists and urbanites, right? And there's all these like sort of like labyrinthine like factions and fights, and it's to what end? I mean, that's sort of a funny question for me to ask because I kind of professionally pay attention to this stuff, but for you, like to what end to what's the point, right? There is no point. It doesn't really matter unless you're trying to trace the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean sometimes it can be a little annoying when people allude to a meme that I don't get, and then I gotta go to Urban Dictionary or whatever. But that's the main functional issue. I think there's been so many times where stuff has happened where everyone's commenting on it and I just ignore it and I don't even remember what it was. You know?
Yeah.
Because there's always something literally every 2 days. Every 2 days there's something. And yes, if like I found a story about it, an article about it, it would have jogged my memory, but they're so unimportant most of the time. It's like, oh, like some guy made his son eat beans and that was mean. Oh, they're snapping eggs onto kids' foreheads. Like these are real things, I think, you know? And I just ignore because like what are you gonna do? On the other hand, you wrote an article which we want to talk about, but X, Twitter, it's a big deal. It's driving all of this media. It is the media. In a way, I mean, would you say Twitter is the media in a way?
Not totally, but in large part, yeah, I think so.
Well, because I feel like, and this is a problem because they've been telling journalists for years now, like more than 5 years, like mainstream media, the older editors are like, get off Twitter, although stay on Twitter to publicize your articles, but don't read it, don't be influenced by it. But it's pretty obvious that it didn't work, and I don't hear those things anymore. They don't even bother. They're just like whatever, you know. It's just
I
part
mean,
of being a journalist.
yeah, I feel like, you know, not only I honestly I think I get work like partially because I get engagement and because I'm so online, right? Like because I'm so on Twitter, even because the other really weird thing is like on Twitter, like being very online is being very on Twitter, right? There's different ways to be very online. Like I've always been very online. I just haven't always been on Twitter the way I am now, right? And that's considered a strength because it means that you're like more in touch and you know what's going on. And it's a really weird thing because you don't really know what's going on. You only know what's going on within this like certain bubble.
Yes, exactly. So, speaking of bubble, let's talk about the Elon bubble or whatever's going on in Elon's head. Um, I mean, you kind of opened up the possibility that that Twitter might end. Do you think? I mean, let's just like do a little bit of prognostication here. I was pretty skeptical that Twitter was going to end when Elon took over and he like fired all the engineers because I've heard some stuff about how they ran the ship and it looks like there was a lot of dead weight and there clearly was because it's still around. But I will be honest, like all of these ideas that he has, that he's experimenting constantly, it's kind of exhausting, and I think it's gonna wear people out. And at some point, there will be the negative feedback loop, but we're not there yet. What do you think?
I don't think we're there yet either. I think there needs to be a good replacement, or if there isn't, digital media is just going to die, right? There needs to be somewhere else for these people to go for Twitter to really end. Um, and it might be TikTok. I think, but it's just like you're not gonna make a TikTok every time you write an article. I have seen there are journalists who do that, and there's journalists who do it successfully, but I just can't. I can think of three of them, and they're all like
Yeah.
relatively good-looking women, minus one who
Wait,
isn't
wait,
at
wait,
all.
wait, wait. Who are you talking about?
I don't want to name names because I just called one of them ugly, and then I called the other two hot, and it's all of that's weird for me to say. But I can think of three. I can think of three female journalists who use TikTok effectively. And then like, what's Michael Lind gonna do, right? How is he gonna call you a eugenicon on TikTok?
I'm getting an image right now, and it's a funny image.
I mean,
But
maybe, right?
that's like it's like how many kids does Razib Khan have? And then like there's a big three. It's like I don't know. Yeah, I don't really get to. I mean, TikTok's okay. I mean, people can consume TikToks for like hours. I don't get it. It's not my thing. So people differ. But it's a thing. I think the issue with Twitter, and not the issue, Twitter is text. Text is different than video. Text is different than audio. So like the pivot to video that Facebook was going to do, that it never ended up doing. It's because video and text are different in terms of how you can consume them. Like for example, with video, you gotta like pay attention. With text, you can like go back. You can sample. stop, sample, and it's not that big of a deal, you know? It's much easier to multitask with text. So I think there's different utilities, there's complementarities. And so that's why Twitter has its own niche, right? It can't be replaced by TikTok or YouTube because they're fundamentally different things. Facebook and Twitter are a little bit more competitive in a way because Facebook has a lot of text, but Facebook's really just image and images a lot too as well. So Twitter has an image aspect, but I don't think it's that much of a. I mean, Twitter is the closest heir we have to the bulletin board systems of the 1980s and 1990s. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as you were talking, I was trying to think like where else, where else have journalists gone? Right? There's been different places that they've sort of like right when, we were making the transition to digital media, there's other places where people would get story ideas. Tumblr, Reddit, 4chan being sort of the famous ones. But yeah, I think like it's what's interesting about Twitter is like digital media explodes right when Twitter starts. And so they've always been in this sort of symbiotic relationship. And maybe there was like a short window of time where like Tumblr could have been the place, but not really, right? Like it would be catastrophic, I think, for the industry.
Well, what about Threads?
No, I mean, is anyone using Threads? Last I checked,
I, I I log into Threads every couple of days and tell people I love them.
that's sweet.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be a nice person on Threads. I just say I love you guys. That's all I do on Threads. And I retweet people. It's very saccharine and Instagrammy in my opinion. So I just go with it.
That's sweet, but it's not. I don't know. Blue Sky certainly didn't take off either.
Oh, Blue Sky! I need to log into my Blue Sky account. Let me just check it out now. Actually, just so the listeners know, the reason that I log into, I actually have an account on everything. And Kat, do you know why I do that?
So no one could pretend to be you and take your name.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's why they pay you
Yeah.
the medium bucks. Like normal people do not realize that if you have a, I don't know, name, or if you have a public profile, it's very, very common for a hater to squat on your name and then start talking. So I have so for example, I have accounts on, I think I'm 99% sure because I never log in after I initially squat, but I have accounts on Gab and all these other sketchy sites, but it's mostly because I immediately go on, I reserve Razib Khan, and then I don't ever log in again. But once I have the account, nobody else can use it,
Yeah.
So you got to do things like that. But yeah, Blue Sky, all of these other things. The issue is their functionality is not that different. It's not about the functionality; it's about the incumbency effect, right? You cannot. This is a stable equilibrium. Twitter is a stable equilibrium right now, no matter what Elon's trying to do, shock it off its course.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It would just the amount of time, and that's the other thing. It takes time for these platforms to grow and to become what they are. Like Tumblr is so interesting because Tumblr was started in 2007. I'm pretty sure I was in high school when I first got on Tumblr, and it was very confusing, and not many people were on it. And then it didn't really come into itself until 2011, 2012, and then it had sort of a second life much
Yeah,
later, right? And
yeah,
it just it take but now even though people are still on it and the site isn't dead, it feels almost like this piece of internet history. But it took so long for that to happen. And same
yeah.
with Twitter. Twitter took a really long time to mature. And so there's this expectation of oh well, we're all going to move to Blue Sky, and then Blue Sky is going to just shutter Twitter. Even if is what that migration is going to happen, I feel like the lifespan is it just takes so much longer than people think. It's not going to happen in a week or a month or 2 months. It takes a while.
Yeah, so Twitter, it was it 2006 South by Southwest that it debuted? Was it 2006 or 2007?
I think it was 2007 too. And then
Okay.
yeah, and there's
Yes,
that
there was,
famous Twitter too.
yeah, yeah. So 2007, and media people started using it, but it wasn't a major cultural thing for like 2 or 3 years. It was slow burn. I remember Tim O'Reilly of O'Reilly Media. He would tweet about how he had just eaten a sandwich, and this was literally through the SMS. So Twitter was originally oriented towards short messaging services, and people would just. I remember I did it a couple of times that way too. That's been deprecated, by the way. A lot of people don't know that it's not. You can't do it that way anymore. But in any case, people used to do it was an SMS service, and then eventually got hooked into the web, or that was an option. And then people started articulating thoughts instead of updates. So Twitter was really just a public updating service, and it kind of organically evolved. Journalists kind of took it over, turned it into the public space, the public square. We probably remember Arab Spring, other sorts of things happened. Facebook came up around the same time. The two were kind of overlapping, but they've really bifurcated now. Facebook is really the boomer platform. People's parents are on it, grandparents are on it, and I don't know what I mean. I mostly images, and also like talking to people that I knew from high school, or keeping up on them, stalking them somehow. Twitter's not like that at all. Very few people from my high school are on Twitter. A few of them are, but
That
very
you know
few.
of, right? I think what's interesting about Twitter is, if I'm not mistaken, I might be misremembering this. I think like the quote unquote like discovery of Black Twitter is what really started making it popular. There was a few like news. There was a Slate article, and then maybe like a New York Times article about like, man, Black people are using Twitter in this weird way, and that actually helped it explode. I might be misremembering
No, I
history.
remember that article. I remember that article that Black people, that basically Black Americans were overrepresented in the production of content on Twitter, viral content, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you can see it even today, like when you go to the GIFs, the expressions and all these things. There's a lot of like Black people in it, like it's just how it is. And so that's an interesting point. Woke culture came out of woke was originally a Black thing. It's been literally culturally appropriated. No one complains about this, by the way, but it is how it is. Woke got culturally appropriated, just like
I
words like bro and
I think Compact actually, and I didn't read I don't subscribe, funnily enough, but I think they had an article recently. I was like Black woke versus white woke, and I actually do want to read that, because that I think it might address like what like woke was kind of like and I don't know if there's a better way to put this, kind of like a hotep term initially, wasn't it? To
yeah,
kind
like
of
it's very conspiracy theories. Like get woke, like wake
yeah.
up, right? And so yeah, Lee Siegel, Black woke versus woke white. Yeah, Lee Siegel. I know Lee a little bit, but yeah. I didn't read that, but I saw it. It's there. Okay, it was 8 days ago. But yeah, it was a hotep. So hotep is well. I mean, again, hotep was originally pre-internet. It was around, like it comes out of Black nationalism and Nation of Islam spin-off, and then what is it, the 5% Nation and all that stuff. But there's whole subcultures online that have their own lexicon, have their own ecosystems that you don't know about. Hotep's one of them, and stuff leaks out of Hotep, and then sometimes when it goes into the mainstream, people are like, "Whoa, what is this? Like, what's his name? Mariah Carey's uh, ex husband. Is it his ex husband or ex boyfriend? Yeah, Nick Cannon. So Nick Cannon, all that stuff about like how white people don't have souls and melanated and all that stupid stuff. I mean, that's just like part of Hotep culture. It's part of the understanding of the Hotep worldview. It's very normative and just accepted in a lot of, I would say, inner city, lower middle class, lower class, Black male culture. These Hotep ideas, but once it got exploded out to mainstream media, and white female cable news presenters started talking about it, it seemed crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is I had this weird moment like a few weeks ago, maybe it was months ago at this point, where I was where I was like, I feel like I have a lot of exposure to white nationalism just because it's always in the news and it's on Twitter and it's very, very visible, but I don't know anything about Black nationalism or Black separatism or Afrocentrism or any of these things. And I went down this rabbit hole, and I ended up getting to this woman named Scheherazade Ali, and she was like operating in the 80s and early 90s, and she sounds down to like verbatim quotes exactly like Pearl Davis, Pearly Things. And I had this realization, I'm like, did they kind of invent the manosphere? Like, is this
Oh yeah, they
not
did.
just like a, and then I ended up saying like, damn, like everyone sort of accuses the Black manosphere of like piggybacking on the like red pill community that sort of grew online. But I think it was actually like pickup artists that were reacting to the sexual revolution, and that was sort of a white thing. And then there was like a separate Black manosphere that actually was like much more influential. That is like, you know, way older, sort of same time period, but so much stuff comes from that, and like no one knows about it, and it's wild.
Yeah. So actually, I know a little too much about pearly things. We are 1 degree separated. We are talking about a lot of things that I'm sorry to say the boomers in my listening audience, like, you know, I know that you're just like, what is going on here? So I'm gonna elucidate it for you a little bit. Pearly things is a young woman, Hannah Pearl Davis, wealthy woman from Chicago, ginger, so she has no soul. She was semi-pro soccer player in England. Because of the pandemic, they stopped playing or something. She eventually decided to take some investment money from her dad, who's a wealthy businessman in Chicago, and she has a little YouTube empire, like Pearly Things, and it's a lot of it is kind of dating advice, and it's like a talk show. It's a little bit like a Jerry Springer type thing for Zoomers, but not really. There's no violence or anything. But basically, a lot of her shtick is taken from Manosphere. It's a woman. It's a young white woman, uh, young upper middle class white woman, uh, mouthing Manosphere talking points. But a lot of it is similar to stuff from a show called Fresh and Fit, which is two black guys from Miami, and they are Manosphere types, and like they're high value men. That's what they'll call themselves, right? And when you hear that term, there's all these terms that they have, and that's just how it is. But yeah, the genealogy of how things emerge from one culture to another is interesting. It's kind of like rock and roll, like Elvis. I mean, this is famous. Everyone knows this. Elvis took black music, or like the black hillbilly synthetic music, and brought it to the white masses in a form that they found palatable as a attractive, young white man, right? And so people like Pearly Things, they are, like Pearl, she's bringing it to an audience that's a somewhat different than the audience that would watch Fresh and Fit. And if you watch Fresh and Fit, it's a black show, right? It's a black lexicon, it's black concerns, it's black centered, it centers blackness. Like that's normative in Fresh and Fit. So obviously it's not as attractive, or it's not going to be as interesting to people outside that community. There's a lot more non-black people out there than black people, and so it's a capitalist opportunity, and that's how the internet works. That's how internet culture is. It's porous, it's viscous, it's interconnected. And like when you say Twitter, like actually is a node. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to describe it.
I mean, basically, it's like a heart, and it's like transmitting things here and there. I mean, how are you feeling? I mean, do you like Twitter? Like, what's your experience? Do you like it? Like, a lot of people have love hate, guilt relationship with it.
So, on the one hand, it's brought me like so much opportunity. I've met some of my best friends on it. I've met so many like now like in the physical world like good friends on Twitter. I forgot that they were Twitter people at any point, right? But on the other hand, I feel like I have like so many just like crazy A-logs. It's made me like get in my head about shit I was never thinking about. There's a new thing to be insecure about every single day. I'm never going to turn on notification filters. So I'm kind of like, it's brought me so much joy and so much opportunity, but at like such a huge like psychological and emotional tax.
Yeah, like talk about what is that tax? What is the emotional tax?
I mean, like, I'm just, well, I was saying earlier, like, a lot of journalists sort of, like, to use a DEI HR term, like, bring their whole selves to the timeline. And, like, there is no, like, Katherine Dee default friend persona. And, like, not really. I mean, there's things I won't share just for self-preservation. But I am, like, my tweets are things that I would say. And they're things I say on podcasts and in real life. And so I take the criticism very personally. And I've gotten better at it. But it's like really hard, especially when you have like a random person you've never met who just like gets it in their head that you're evil or like you need to be taken down a peg or something. You're kind of like, well, what the fuck? Like, what did I do? Right. And it's so hard to be like, oh, well, some people are just like this. Like there's a huge, like I'm broadcasting to a bunch of people I can't even see. And who knows what stories that they've made up, or who knows what things I've actually done that are offensive to a community where I'm not aware of the rules or something. So it's
Mhm.
it's it's hard to see myself as like a public figure of any kind, even if I'm like relatively niche.
Yeah, in terms of being a public figure in Twitter and all that stuff, it's interesting. I don't know. Would you call me a public figure?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people
Okay.
know who you are.
Okay, because I don't know what that means, but yeah, I don't put. I mean, I put myself. I don't talk about my personal. I don't talk about my personal life. You know that on Twitter. I might allude to it here and there, but there are certain things I definitely do not talk about. Yeah, there's things I talk about in real life that I definitely do not talk about on Twitter. I'm not going to get into what that is, but there are people who have moved to Austin that have followed me for many years. I've been on Twitter for a while, so there are people who started following me as a teenager and now they're in their mid-20s, software engineer. They moved to Austin. They start hanging out with me, and then I find out that they know me from Twitter, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're somewhat different in this one way or this other way," and that's when like what you hold back and what you present. And I look at Twitter in a very instrumental way. Like, what can it do for me? What do I get out of it? And I don't, I mean, I've made friends out of it, but I also have I make sure I have other, just like you, I make sure I have other platforms and distribution channels. And this is really important in terms of today, because Twitter is a privately held company and it's basically the plaything of one Elon Musk. And that is a little disturbing sometimes to me. Now, I have to say I mean, this is going to polarize the audience. I'm kind of pro Musk overall. I'm friendly with his circle. I will say that I have been in the same room with him in Austin, so he's part of this world. He is a human being. He does walk amongst us. But the capriciousness, with the way he behaves, is really stressful, and I do feel. I mean, I'm not one of those people, "Oh, I'm quitting Twitter and then I'm gonna be back." I don't do that all the time, but I feel like my own internal reserves slowly depleting because, for example, just a selfish thing that I'm gonna bring up. He's been deboosting Substack, you know? That's affecting my bread and butter. And it's because he has a beef with the Substack founders and whatever, it is what it is. But the ultimate issue is he's judge, jury, and executioner. There's no appeal to him. And this sort of behavior is really disconcerting because if it's the public square, there's got to be rules beyond the fiat of the pharaoh,
Yeah, I mean, now he says he wants to take away headlines. He wants journalists to publish directly to Twitter. And he's like, well, now you can make more money. Well, it's great, but like, what if you got deboosted, like, you and I might have, because we post a lot of Substack links, and you write like a well thought out piece about whatever, and I write maybe a less well thought out piece about whatever, and then we make 50 cents, and then to add insult to injury, Ian Miles Chong walks away with $25,000 a month. It's like there's so many, like, that's not any better than it was. Like, stuff's super corrupt right now, and I'm with him, like, with his ire
Yeah.
towards the media. I get it. I understand why he's upset with the press, but like, is it really better the way things are now? I don't know.
I mean, it's certainly different. I guess the issue that I do worry about is Elon, he's involved in Neuralink, or not Neuralink, Starlink. I mean, Neuralink, obviously, he's involved in so many things. He has so much power. And on the whole, like, I'm more pro Elon than the average, probably PMC, professional managerial class person. But it worries me to have all this power in one man's hands. And so now we're talking about the media. We're talking about Twitter, how Twitter is the node. It's kind of the switchboard, Elon controls the switchboard. So if he doesn't want you to get through, you're not going to get through. So that's disturbing, right? That's disturbing. Elon Musk, if internet culture is culture and Twitter is one of the main nodes of the internet, Elon Musk controls our culture.
Yeah.
And that's disturbing.
I don't think he's been so much. I don't think he's been so authoritarian with it that he's killing. Like, I don't think he's like exterminating subcultures or anything. And to be fair, like, to say something in his favor, the old version of Twitter, prior management, kind of didn't exterminate subcultures, but they definitely kneecapped a lot of them in a way that felt more intense than Musk's rule,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
Um,
I feel that. I
so
feel that.
it's I think it could be worse, but yeah, it is. It's like definitely frustrating that like your visibility is impacted probably because of so many people have opted into the monetization thing. But like if you post, I think it, and I have no one said this, but I have a suspicion if you post too many like to articles on outside platforms, like I find that I see a lot fewer like like it used to be like every day there'd be like an Atlantic article going viral or a New Yorker article or something. I don't see that quite as often
I've noticed that
anymore.
too.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
there's pros and cons to that. Like, the pro is like like should the Atlantic still be ruling the roost? I don't have a particular bone to pick with them, but maybe it's not a meritocracy either way. Whereas
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, what I would say is, because I've been thinking about this because Elon does do things, and I've seen it. Like you can test it. He has deboosted, like he's like put a delay because it's him who's done this. He's put a delay on New York Times and Substack links and other things like that, right? Okay, that's fine. Like 5 second delay. I think like if you go to Substack.com, I don't think that this applies if it's anyway custom domain. But in any case, he's done stuff like this, and it's disturbing and it's annoying because in a liberal rule-based order, equality before the law is super important. That's how things function. Obviously this is not a government, but Twitter functions as a kind of a confederation or a constellation or a little republic of tweets, or republic of X's, whatever. And then when there are different rules for different people and different institutions, it starts to get really confusing, and people are going to start opt-outing or behaving badly.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. And the thing is, I think the people who will start leaving and getting and opting out first are probably the people who you would have expected to stay. Like the people who, like the Atlantic or the New York Times, they're going to find other ways to advertise themselves. But someone who's really like earning their money off of Substack, they're going to need to say, all right, I'm going to have to make, if like it's really, really suppressed, they're going to have to like make another platform work. They're going to have to find a way to
Yeah.
distribute.
Well, I mean, that's why you do. So I started Substack in 2020, but I started a Mailchimp earlier. I have blogs. I've done other things over the years. But it was fall of 2016, I believe. I remember my friend. I'm not going to say his name, but he was a coworker. Out of Silicon Valley when I was working at Embark, the doggy DNA company, and he's like, "You need to start a mailing list because you never know what the platforms are going to do. You never know. If you don't have control, you never know." And he was prescient. You never know what's going to happen, what the platform is going to do, who's going to get suspended, who's going to get yanked, because ultimately there's not that much real appeal. Like, yeah, there's appeal, but you have to have pull. Years ago, like a couple of years ago, I got brigaded on Clubhouse, and they suspended my account or whatever. And then I called Eric Weinstein, and he called the founders of Clubhouse and got me reinstated. Well, I mean, I had some pull, obviously. That's not really fair. Like a lot of normal people get, they get squelched that way because some random person. I have a friend. She's just a normal person, and her account got suspended, and she didn't understand why. She's very SJW, by the way, so it's not like she's right wing. And later, she found out that someone on Twitter. This is before the Elon era. Someone on Twitter did not like her and decided to blacklist her account, and they put enough pressure and enough weight behind it that nobody else really wanted to bug about it because she's a nobody.
Right.
Stuff like that happens, and that's not cool.
Yeah. That's, man, that's my nightmare.
Yeah, like someone just decided. The issue is though you wouldn't have a problem because your default friend, you have enough pull, So there's different rules for different people. That's what's really bothersome. If you can find an angle, you can find an angle if you have power. If you don't have power, you don't. And so I think one of the things that Twitter and social media and the internet was supposed to do was to democratize. And it has democratized in some ways, but ultimately your power really matters and is still playing out. And there's all these rules on Twitter like block quoting, don't block quote, and dunk on small accounts and stuff like that. But that is predicated on certain norms that are enforced, and people just have to honor it. And they're not necessarily doing that right now, especially in a context where you're monetizing engagement. And so we've been talking for a while. I want to end with this topic because like it is something that I've talked about with other people that are on Twitter. I've gotten a little bit of money out. Actually, I turned on monetization. Not Ian Miles, like, I mean, I'll just say it, like $226, whatever. I mean, I get millions of impressions, like I've gotten like 18 million impressions 1 month. So I don't know how they're calculating it. It's fine. I make good money on Substack, so I'm not whining, but I think monetization in this way with impressions uh might be very dangerous in terms of the incentives. What do you think?
I don't totally understand how it works. My impressions went like if you look at the month over month, my impressions went way down, and and more than that, I know people who have less followers or a comparable amount of impressions who make a lot more than I do. Like I'm not even making, and I've been
Yeah,
like super honest about this. I'm not even making $200. I'm not even making $100. I'm in the same
yeah,
boat as you. I make plenty writing, and I make plenty from Substack, but I don't like. It makes me wonder, like, how does this work? Like, am I on some kind of blacklist or something? Like, there's
yeah,
just no way that I have 40,000 plus followers. I have at a minimum 6 million impressions a month. I mean, and that seems kind of low from what it was. And then I'm making like, I made like $20 one time. It's like it's just
yeah.
weird. I don't understand how it's calculated.
It's not transparent. It's not transparent.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Also, like this is just random, and I don't care. It's not a big deal. But I was getting like 1,000 new followers per month until the Elon regime. In fact, the last month before Elon, I got 2,000, and since then, I have gotten like 300 to 800 followers. So something changed there, which is fine. I don't mind. But there's been tweaks in there that have happened that have affected people, and I wish there'd been a little bit more transparency about that. But yeah, there were people who got our level of impressions that were getting thousands of dollars. I mean, like Richard Hanania is getting like $1,700, $2,000 a month, and his account is about the same size as mine. I think he'd probably get a few more tweet impressions because he trolls, but still.
Yeah, it doesn't totally make sense to me. And I had a follower drop off too, right? And it's, I don't think my content's changed. But I think like, what I think it might be for both of us actually. You are hugely negatively impacted if people mute and block you, and both of us are, we are memes in certain corners of the internet, and we experience mass blocks and mass mutes almost as like a bit sometimes. And I think that has actually, we've paid a price for, like, weirdly, we're like in this weird level of fame where like we pay a price that someone who maybe
I
has a
see.
larger platform doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, I have recurrent beefs with certain sectors of the internet, and I don't actually avoid them. I just run towards them, and then I just do a mass cull. But of course, they're doing the same thing to me. So I might block like 50 people overnight, and I'm sure I got blocked by about 50 people. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, or even just like muted. Like maybe like people, they love your stuff and they're like, I'm just gonna manually check his timeline because he's always beefing with people or something.
I mean, I'm not always beefing. I just have like periodic like
You have
beef out.
little episodes. Yeah.
I'm an episodic beef. I'm an episodic beefer. That is what I do, and I know what I do it before I go to sleep. I put out a tweet, and I know exactly what it's going to attract. And I get up in the morning and I do my work. I do the work. I block. I come back at them, and it's done. But yeah. I had not thought about that. I mean, that's the issue. I don't think in much detail about what the hell I'm doing on this platform. It's very organic, and I just like follow my whim and whimsy. But now that people are monetizing it, you have 40,000 followers, I have 67,000, almost 68,000 followers. And then you see other people that are making thousands and thousands of dollars. And it's like, yeah, even with inflation, that still matters. It affects
Yeah.
you on some level. Like you start to think like, wait, am I leaving money on the table?
Yeah. And maybe we should monetize on other platforms. Like I had maybe this is where we end it. I had a very disturbing morning. I woke up at 5. That's just when I wake up. At 5, I did all my morning chores. I wrote my little articles, and then I thought to myself, like completely sincerely, I'm going to start making TikTok. And I recorded a TikTok at like 7 a.m. And I was like, I can't let this be who I am. I can't publish this. I can't let this replace Twitter. It's already too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, I mean, I got a buddy of mine, and he does a TikTok, genetics TikTok, and it's pretty big. But yeah, I don't know. It's not going to be me. I did start posting the podcast and stuff on YouTube because that's good for discovery, but I don't think that that's that big of a deal. You just have to do what you have to do. But yeah, so we've been talking for a while. We touched a lot of subjects. I'm sure people are going to be following the links and some of these esoteric. I mean, I don't know if they're esoteric is the wrong word. Maybe parochial is the right word because everything is parochial now. Everything is universal and also parochial in some way, if that makes sense. But there's all these subcultures and they're accessible, but you need to look. And if you don't look, they don't exist, but they're there.
I think that's a perfect way of putting it. Parochial is. I'm gonna start adopting that word to describe this stuff.
All right. Well, it was great talking to you, Catherine. The article is why you're never leaving Twitter. I mean, it should be why you're never leaving X, but you just put Twitter, right? You wrote it before they changed. Did you was the piece pitched before it was X?
Yeah, it was one of these things where like I had written it earlier in the summer and they just hadn't found like a right time
Yeah,
to publish it.
I know how
And
that goes.
then yeah, but I like dead naming it. Something feels good and rebellious about that.
Yeah, I mean, people routinely like in the media. It's like the platform formerly known as Twitter. They're just having fun with it. It's just the fun joke now. But anyways, it was great catching up. It was great talking to you. And don't be freezing up there in Chicago. Well, I guess that's Wait, do people know that you live there?
Yeah, they do know that I live there, and guess what? It's over 100 degrees right now.
Okay, well, don't melt down. I don't know. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. All right. I guess I'll see. I'll see you. I'll see you on the interwebs, on the information superhighway, as they say.
All right. See you around.
This podcast for kids